I thank you. It's now a little after 6:30, so let's get going. Call the meeting to order. The first item is the roll call. Might as well start over with you, Dave.
Actually, before you start the roll call, I have a challenge to the Board of Health Director sitting in for Henrietta. As far as I'm concerned, the law, the regulations are not that clear, and I'd like to have a decision by the Attorney General as to who can and cannot appoint designees.
Okay. The way I think this works, and frankly, there have been discussions on this subject from last week. It's a question of how I have to make the first decision on how to read the statute. And let me just start right there. The statute, and I'm not sure if anybody particularly has it in front of them. Here we are. Statute is number 7456. Statute is number 2. Excuse me a moment. The statute reads, the statute reads, there shall be created a nuclear decommissioning citizens advisory panel, and now we get to the important language, which shall consist of the following members or their designees. That leads to a list of 21 members. My reading of the statute, and it certainly could have been written otherwise, is that each of those members has the ability and the right to appoint a designee. The first 4 or 5 are state secretaries and the like, and you would expect them to be able to appoint designees. The statute could have been written so that only they had the right to appoint designees, but that's not the way that I read it. On my reading of the statute, basically I have to rule whether or not any member has the right to appoint a designee, and that is my reading of the statute, and that is my ruling. So where does that take us from here? The panel has the right to overrule that reading. Mary Gaslick has mentioned that she would like to seek the Attorney General's view on it, which is perfectly fine by me, but as we take this step by step, I guess the first question is that having made the ruling, does anyone in the panel have any motion to offer?
Is there going to be any discussion, Mr. Chairman?
After a motion. The way it works, we get the motion, we get a second, and then we can discuss the motion.
Okay, I move that we discuss whether or not your decision is correct. And you say today that you think that they can appoint, anybody can appoint a designee?
My reading of the statute is that any of the listed members, following the phrase, the following members or their designees, may appoint a designee. There is no separation in the listing in terms of who can and who cannot, so that's my reading of the statute.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me?
Point of information, please.
Surely.
I just don't know which member you're talking about, so I don't.
We're talking about Henrietta Costantino is out of the country, and she has designated Dr. Barry Potkin to sit in for her tonight.
And she was appointed by the Board of
Selectmen by the Plymouth Board of Selectmen. Right? If you go down to, she is one of the 2 representatives of the town of Plymouth as selected by the Plymouth Board of Selectmen, and I'm reading the statute.
Okay, so thanks for that clarification, and I do have an opinion that the Board of Selectmen should be appointed the representative.
Did I hear a second to the
You
motion?
did, Mike, second it.
Second that motion. If I could, in my particular case, I'll give you an example. I don't know if it's totally germane to this discussion right now, but, so I had been nominated to be on the board. However, I was waiting till till I got appointed officially by the Senate Minority Leader. But at the meeting, John Mahoney, because I had already been, chosen to be on the panel, but still just waiting for to be final approval, said, well, I could actually come up one night and I could sit on the panel. But then after discussion, it was determined that that would be inappropriate, totally inappropriate. So I'm not sure that adds light to this exactly, but I don't know, I just kind of feel that if someone can't make the meeting, they can't make it. And as long as we have a quorum, I don't understand why, and it's nothing to do with Dr. Potvin, but I just don't understand why someone has the right to just pick anybody that they want to replace them. That's just my opinion.
Could I just ask a question? John, were you being designated by John to sit in any absent member's place? Was that the thinking?
No, what John said, he actually said, Mike Fortini's out there. He's, just waiting to get his official nomination. He asked, can he come up and sit here? And basically, after a discussion, it was determined that no, would not be allowed to.
Yeah. Okay. Just to show how neat and messy that gets, that is the way I would have read the statute because you were not yet officially a member.
But in this particular case, neither is any of the designee that we have from one of the panel members. I just don't see it as appropriate, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm not arguing whether you do or do not. Any other discussion?
Again, just because I spoke out of line before, Mrs. Pine, I think that the Board of Selectmen, I think Henrietta should have directed the need for a replacement to the Board of Selectmen, who should have appointed it, just, because that's the appointing authority. Just as if I were not able to go, as Mike is pointing out here, I would have to ask the Speaker of the House to replace me for the meeting. Just like when Holtec can't make it, their Holtec representative replaces that person. The person doesn't replace themselves. That's all. That's the way I see it. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Okay, I think to make sure we've got this. She's not here. Can you help me keep track of the vote?
Sure.
Should we take, I'd like to do this by a roll call just to make sure we have everybody. Mr. Noyes?
I'm sorry, what are we voting on?
Well, actually, would you restate your motion, please?
Okay, we're voting on whether or not the Board of Health Director can sit in for Henrietta Constantina as her designee when she's been appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
I think the actual motion probably is to overrule my ruling.
That's correct. Overrule your ruling.
I vote to overrule.
Mr. Moylan?
I vote to overrule.
Mr. O'Brien?
I vote to overrule.
Ms. Dubois?
Yes, overrule.
Mr. Fortini?
Yes, overruled.
Ms. Gatzley?
Gatzlick.
Gatzley.
I vote to
You're right.
overrule.
I misspelled your name. My apologies.
That's correct.
Myself,
Mr. Lambert?
I would vote no. Mr. Canty is not here. Mr. Nichols?
I vote to overrule.
Mr. Priest?
I vote to abstain.
Mr. Pickering?
I vote to overrule.
Mr. Slocum?
I vote to abstain.
Mr. Bryant?
I vote to overrule.
Mr. Potkin? You're going to abstain, I assume. See, I don't think you probably should vote,
I
can vote on this.
definitely will abstain, yes.
Mr. Gottlieb?
Vote to overrule.
Mis- Overrule, Andrew.
Yes.
Ms. Waldron?
vote to overrule.
11 overrules.
11.
That's
We
correct.
have 11 to what? To 1.
And
The motion carries.
Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate at this time, because I believe that the motion was going, would it make sense for this board to, in fact, communicate to the Attorney General's office for further review of the process so it can be some clarity that can be added to this language?
I think Ms. Gasly had mentioned to me before the meeting that she was going to ask the Attorney General, and I think frankly that probably is a pretty good idea that we should do so and probably do so jointly.
Yep. That sounds good. I'll draw up the letter and I'll send it to you.
Great. All right, now we can move to the roll call that we.
Dave Noyes, Compliance Manager representing Holtec Decommissioning International.
John Moylan, Site Vice President in Holtec.
Kelly O'Brien, UWA representative.
Mike Fortini, appointed by the Senate Minority Leader.
Mary Gaslick, appointed by the Minority Leader in the Senate.
James Lampert, appointed by the Speaker of the House.
David Nichols, appointed by Governor Baker. John Slocum, designee of the Commissioner of the Department of Public Utilities.
Seth Pickering of the Mass DEP, designated by the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
David Bryant, Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency.
On the board, Mr. Gottlieb.
Andrew Gottlieb, Association Observe Cape Cod, appointed by Governor Baker.
Ms. Waldron.
Good evening, everyone. Mary Waldron, Old Colony Planning Council.
And I believe Ms. Dubois.
Pine Dubois, appointed by the Speaker of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Moving on, I think next on the agenda is the minutes. Jack, did I miss you?
You did. Jack Priest,
Sorry.
representing the Commissioner for the Department of
Thanks.
Public Health.
There you are, okay. Moving on to the minutes. I hope everyone has had a chance to review them. Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes? Dave?
On page 3, I believe it's the 4th or 5th paragraph down, Dr. Potvin's name is misspelled. And then a little bit later on in that paragraph, insured should be ensued.
Got it.
And then there's maybe a couple of things that might be treated as errata. I believe they were
What additional discussion, insured, or what was the change?
ensued.
Ensued, thank you.
Right. And then there were a couple of things that are represented correctly as they were put out at the meeting, but I believe that they're incorrect information. One of them was mine. On that same page in the 3rd paragraph, I indicated that the report, the financial report, was going to be submitted to the NRC in May of 2024. It's actually March of 2024.
Correct, that's my understanding.
And then 2 pages further back, there's a discussion of the Phase 2 comprehensive site assessment. It's due to be presented April 21st of 2025, not 2024.
Okay. And while you're on that page, excuse me, I guess it's not on that page. I had one question. Where to? Can't find it. It's on page 2. Under Holtec HDI decommissioning update, the second line, is that the partial or the complete license termination plan in the first bullet?
It's the complete license termination plan supporting partial site release, everything with the exception of the ISFC.
supporting partial site release.
That's correct. But it's the entire license termination plan.
Thank you. And on the page, third page, Dave, again for you, just a question. The last line of the page refers to purchased in about January of 2021. Is that date correct? I'm on the third page in the last line. Was it purchased by Holtec in about January 2021? I think that's too late.
It is too late. It was 2019.
It was mid-year, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
In 2019 would be just correct.
Yes.
All right. I noticed a few questions here of singular versus plural, that with the panel's permission, I'll just correct those as opposed to going through those one by one. Okay. Fine. All right, Mr. Noyes, I guess it's Holtec.
Is there a motion to approve?
Oh, hold about that. Do I hear a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Pine abstains.
I didn't pick up the voice, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Pine is abstaining.
Thank you, Pine. Okay, Dave.
All right, this is our March update. First slide, as usual, is the combined waterfall, which shows the specific work streams associated with the decommissioning effort. The key dates have not changed. We're still working toward license termination plan submittal to the NRC in the fall of this year. With the support of ongoing for the characterization effort, we're doing site building and site structure surveys. No changes to the ISFAC. Continue to maintain the facility and the security posture for the dry cask storage. I'll discuss reactor segmentation, demolition, and waste management in their own standalone slides. And site restoration will be following the completion of demolition activities. So within the past 2 months, demolition activities that have been accomplished include the upper security access enclosure and the old main gate stairs. Starting on the left-hand side of the picture was a security access enclosure that was in the upper parking lot adjacent to the ISFAC that's no longer required to support the current security posture. So that building and its contents were demolished down to grade level. And also demolished was the galvanized steel structure, which was the stairs from the old main gate building and access from the upper parking lot. So those activities have been completed. Upcoming for demolition activities will be removal of 2 underground storage tanks. These are 20,000-gallon heating boiler fuel oil tanks. The picture is actually a picture of the removal of the emergency diesel generator tank, which was done last year. These heating boiler tanks are now no longer required for building heating based on are demonstrating the ability to heat the buildings through heating of the spent fuel pool and then transport of that water throughout the reactor building. So those tanks are no longer required. They have been put in long-term layup, and the tanks will be removed within the next 4 to 6 weeks. As part of that activity to remove those heating boiler tanks, between the tanks there's an 8-inch fire main that runs within 3 feet of each of the tanks. So that portion of the fire main needed to be rerouted. That section of piping needs to be abandoned before we can pull the tanks. So part of the work activity for being able to do this tank removal is to first abandon that line so that we don't compromise the site's fire system.
Has it now been rerouted?
What's that?
Has it now been rerouted?
It has. The activities for removal of the tanks involve the town fire department, designated by Mass DEP as a qualified individual for being able to monitor the tank removal, along with a licensed site professional that we hire that performs sampling of the adjacent soil to verify that there was not any leakage from the tank, and to provide oversight and sampling of the activities to verify that it's done properly. So this is the updated demolition status. The 2 green ovals on the upper left-hand portion are those 2 heating boiler tanks, which are due to be removed. The blue buildings, the ones to be remained, are the plant's support building, engineering and support building, and the plant's intake structure. The remaining buildings on site to be demolished are the plant's process buildings, and those are scheduled out in the ESA work plan, and those have been provided in the schedule to Mass DEP. For reactor internal segmentation, we continue with toward the end of removal of the internals of the inside of the reactor vessel. We've completed the separation of the 4th and final cut of the shroud ring, the shroud being the barrel that separated the inner annulus of the reactor where the fuel was from the outer downcomer portion of the vessel. That shroud cut number 4 has been made. Our next pass is to take that shroud ring, that cut portion of the shroud. It'll get transported into the dryer separator pit, where it can be segmented into smaller pieces of waste that can then be put into waste boxes to be staged on site and ultimately shipped off site. Then after the shroud ring number 4 is completed, the only other activity is the lower portion of the 20 diffusers for the jet pumps, and then we're moving toward an early summer drain down of the reactor cavity following the completion of the removal of all the internals. For a regulatory update, so in the 3rd and 4th quarter NRC inspection, we received a severity level 4 violation of the regulation that governs the appropriate use of the Decommissioning Trust Fund. The NRC identified that approximately $84,000 in community contributions between 2020 and 2022 had been improperly charged to the Decommissioning Trust Fund. Following identification of that by the NRC, we've gone back and conducted an analysis. The fund has been made whole. It's been fully reimbursed plus interest from the time that those contributions were made. An extent of condition review has been performed, and we are providing a formal response to the NRC by the end of this month. Just for perspective, this is not the total amount of the charitable contributions that were made in that period of time. It's roughly 50%. So the other 50% had been appropriately charged, but we failed to provide the right controls to ensure that everything had come out of the proper pool of money, and we have taken actions to rectify that. We've also settled a violation with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts over a alleged violation of asbestos control during demolition activities. A couple of demolition activities were conducted at the plant. This was settled without an admission of liability, and it is subject to specific consent judgment restrictions, which prevent me from being able to discuss it in any great detail.
Dave, could you just hold us, if you finish this slide, I just have a couple of comments and questions so people understand this fully, and I'll let you answer them.
Sure.
My understanding, I have read...
Let me finish.
Sure, I thought you were finished this slide. I apologize.
Thank you. I am limited in the kinds of things that I can talk about with respect to this, but I can tell you that there were some subcontract personnel, licensed people to perform this type of work that are no longer performing that work for us. And we have additional checks and balances in place to ensure that these kinds of activities are being performed properly. We're also closely coordinated with Mass DEP. Every 2 weeks we have a meeting with Mass DEP and go over the upcoming asbestos removal activities, make sure that we have the appropriate plans in place, and that those are all approved by Mass DEP prior to moving forward with any asbestos work.
Just a couple of comments. Both the complaint that was filed by the Commonwealth in Suffolk Superior Court and the consent judgment that basically put an end to this are available online through the Suffolk Civil Superior Court website. The amount paid, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, without admitting liability was $200,000.
That's correct.
The judgment specifically states that none of that is to come from the Decommissioning Trust Fund.
It's also accurate.
And it states that it will be paid from, I believe, the Holtec overhead, the HDI overhead fund.
I'm not familiar with exactly where it says it came from, other than the fact that it could not come from decommissioning funds.
John, do you recall?
No, it can't come from the trust fund. So HDI is getting the monies, but I'm not sure what bucket they're taking it from.
Anybody who wants to read it can basically take a look. I'm quite clear it says the HDI overhead fund, which just led me to the question of what is that fund? What is that fund, John? Can you?
I don't want to speculate.
Okay. Could you get back to us on it? Because one of the questions I would have is where the money in that directly or indirectly came from. Did it come directly or indirectly from any decommissioning fund? And I understand that HDI oversees many different sites with a lot of work going on, each of which has its own decommissioning trust fund. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
For source term reduction, continue to, as we generate waste, either through demolition of buildings and structures or removal of material from inside of buildings, we continue for all of the Class A waste that is almost immediately shipped for disposal. The B and C level waste is staged pending the approval of a cast design to be able to transport it. But you can see the numbers for 2024 to date. It's about 6,500 cubic feet of radioactive material with a total activity of 28 curies, bringing the project total to almost 250,000 cubic feet and just under 2,000 curies of activity. For an update with respect to building heating, we did provide a response to the Mass DEP inquiry regarding emissions associated with evaporation, and the building heating being no longer required for the season. The heaters in the spent fuel pool, which are all of the heaters that are installed, were de-energized on March 18th. The plan would be to energize the heaters again when they're required, either for Class B, C waste processing, which we don't currently have a scheduled date for, or when they're required for the next heating season.
Could you explain what you mean by Class BC waste processing?
So the higher waste, the waste that's coming out of the reactor vessel internals, is Class BC waste. That waste is put into containers. Those containers are then dried. The drying of those containers, the time for the drying can be significantly reduced based on elevated temperatures of the water. So the ability to be able to heat the water in the spent fuel pool while we package the waste provides significant efficiency improvements to being able to process that waste and to stage it.
And would they be filled in the reactor building?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
I just had, hey, Dave?
Yes.
Could I just ask one question?
Sure.
So, in support of the critical milestone, the partial site release in 2035,
Yes.
do you have a planned start date for the actual demolition of the turbine building and reactor building?
Yeah, they're scheduled in the 2033 to 2034 timeframe.
So the turbine building being first?
Turbine building being first, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
and obviously that's subject to change if we come up with a disposition path for the water. We may look at the schedule and see what there's opportunities to be able to do that earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dave, I sent you a number of questions, and if you don't mind, how many gallons remain of the to-be-disposed-of water? I saw a letter, I believe, from you to DEP that said as of early March, there were, I believe, 808,000 gallons remaining. How many remain today?
I've never seen a 808,000, maybe 880,000.
800.
That's about where we are now, just under 900,000 gallons.
I'll show you the letter afterward.
Okay.
So
The current volume is approximately 880,000 gallons.
Mr. Chair?
yes, sir. Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Otley.
Yes. David, a couple slides ago, you were talking about the tank removal. Did I hear you correctly to say that the tank removal removed the alternative heating option for the core reactor building, so that all you're left with now to heat that building is installing the heaters in the core reactor?
That would be the plan moving forward. We demonstrated that as an acceptable way to be able to heat. As long as the boilers are still available, it's not irreversible. We could use a temporary tank if we needed to. But the likelihood of having to use tanks and a boiler are a very low probability based on our ability to manage temperature constraints through this past winter.
So, in other words, you've effectively taken away the option you had that does not result in the increased evaporative loss of that radioactive water out the building top, or at the same rate that is achieved by heating the water directly, right?
We've taken away one flow path. Like I said, we could use an above-ground storage tank, and we could use, the house heating boilers, but that was the non-preferred option based on the carbon emissions associated with that method.
So it's all about managing climate change then, I get. Okay, great. So this is the first time I think I've heard a rationale for heating that core reactor water to allow you to more rapidly dry waste C and B waste materials. Have we ever been told that before?
Yes, you have.
When? I've not heard that as a justification for the heating of the core in the last several times that subject matter's come up. It just feels like it's a shift. There's been a shifting rationale associated with that there's some benefit to the broader community. First thing, climate change now, increased efficiency in drying waste materials. Seems like it's a shifting story to justify something that you want to do for your own reasons.
I don't think the positions have changed at all, Mr. Gottlieb.
Well,
Mr. Gottlieb?
yes, sir.
I've
Yes.
been to numerous meetings here, and they were very straightforward that they're using that to heat the water. And it's been discussed numerous times, probably since last year when they first started it. So I'm not sure why you think
I'm not
this is new.
suggesting that they haven't raised the issue of heating the water. What I'm suggesting is that the justification for it is a moving target. Frankly, it makes, I just feel like I'm getting told a series of half-truths, mistruths, and that make listening to all of this, of limited value in terms of, revealing what in fact is happening, why it's happening, and what we can expect to see happening.
Andrew,
maybe we'll go back and look at the
think if
meeting
you,
minutes
go
together.
Back, I think that discussion was part of the NRC's evaluation when those evaporators were first put into use.
Jack was having a little trouble understanding you.
Yeah, can you hear me? Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
I believe there was a discussion about one of the reasons for raising the water temperature was part of the justification that was provided in the briefing with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
I'm just talking, Jack, about what gets said to us in these meetings.
Yeah, I thought we had talked about that. I'd have to go back and look at meeting minutes, Andrew.
I have no. You may be right, Jack. I have no recollection of it.
Yeah. Okay.
It only looks like I'm not paying attention. By
yeah.
actually.
No. I'm not saying that. I said let me. I think I'll go back and look at the meeting minutes to see if that issue was specifically addressed. I know it was discussed. I'm not sure to what the extent at the NDCAP meeting. But I've got a follow-up question for Dave too. So
Go ahead.
I'm a little confused with the sequence timeline. So we're going back to do the jet pumps. That material is going to stay in the pool with the water shielding that material. Is that part correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so then my next question would be, how are you going to do a drain down if that material is still in the pool?
So there are gates that are installed between the reactor cavity and the spent fuel pool.
Right.
Similar to when we operated, we can maintain the spent fuel pool full of water, drain the cavity as we would for reassembling the reactor vessel at the end of work. So the gates allow us to be able to drain the cavity to the torus and still maintain the spent fuel pool full of water.
Okay, so once, so what people would physically see is we have one large pool container of water right now, which is the spent fuel pool and the reactor vessel cavity, correct?
Now, the gates are currently installed. We have the gates. The gates are installed currently, but it does look like one volume from above.
Right.
You're correct.
All right. So when you say you're going to drain the water to the torus, you're only talking about the water in the reactor pool, not the spent fuel pool. So my follow-up question is, what's the volume of water that's going to remain in the spent fuel pool?
The Spent fuel pool volume is about 300,000 gallons.
And the pit.
Yeah, the
And the
dryer.
the dryer separator
the
pit's
dryer
going to be full
separator-
as well.
The dryer separator pit will be drained with the reactor
With
cavity.
the reactor vessel?
Yes, with the cavity, but not the vessel.
Sorry, I couldn't wait for my question.
All right, so let's use round numbers of 900,000 total right now, maybe slightly less than that. Approximately 600,000 gallons will go to the tourists and 300,000 will remain in the spent fuel pool.
That's correct.
So when you reinstall or re-energize heaters, will still be evaporating former reactor coolant water that is in the spent fuel pool.
That's correct. That will evaporate anyway. I mean, science indicates that water in an open pool evaporates. It'll evaporate more with the presence of a heater, but it'll evaporate anyway, just as it
Right.
has for the past 50 years.
Yeah, I got that. I think people, when we were talking about drain down, I just want the people on the panel to understand not all of the water is going to the tourists.
That's right.
That there'll be 300,000 gallons in the spent fuel pool with irradiated material in that pool that will need to be packaged and removed.
That's correct.
All right, so is there a timeline on when that's going to be completed, and then the rest of that water volume would go to the tourists?
No, we haven't finalized that schedule yet.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
So-
Bois?
I just wanted to try to help Andrew recall that in January, I think I went at great length to applaud Holtec for its heaters and so on in the spent fuel pool that were doubling as heating for the entire building. And honestly, I think that in November I was talking about it because I had been on site and had seen a lot of that stuff. So I know that there's been a lot of discussion prior to this. I don't know how much we've emphasized it as Jack has so eloquently done just now in terms of making sure that we're all paying attention. But I do know from being on site and from various conversations with Holtec, both on site and in these meetings, that we have discussed it previously, and I just wanted to pitch my 2 cents. Thanks.
I'm suggesting that's not the case. What I'm objecting to is, and someone can prove me wrong if you want to, that there was discussion about a secondary benefit of process drying out waste associated with that heating. I know we talked about, and a number of us have objected to the notion that you're heating that water that also increases evaporation. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is every time this comes up, and I agree it's come up multiple times, there's some other reason why it's the great idea that serves America and the world well. And I just find the shifting baseline discussion around this offends the hell out of me. That's my point.
There's two
Well,
reasons, and
but I
there's
wanna-
always been two reasons.
Yeah.
There's multiple reasons. And the reasons keep changing. If you want me to go back and look at the tape and count up how many second reasons there are, it's going to be more than two.
Heating the building and B&C waste. What else?
How about getting rid of the water?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question
Surely.
when we're ready.
Mr. Pickering, go ahead.
So, not to repeat some of what Jack was asking, but similar but a little bit different. So, Dave, when you said when the shroud is being cut, you're gonna end up segmenting it in the separated dryer pit?
That's correct, on the PSS, the primary segmentation stand.
So, how much longer do you think you're going to be doing that?
Probably 4 to 6 weeks. But between that and the jet pumps.
Jet pumps, same?
Yes.
So what I mean by that is the jet pumps will also be, they'll be cut out of the reactor cavity, right? Then they'll be placed in the dryer separator pit?
That's correct,
And
yeah.
additionally segmented, cut to into smaller pieces?
Right, yeah, you can see in the waste picture, inside those containers
Yeah.
are the upper portion of the jet pump barrels.
Understood. So we're looking at another 6 to 8 weeks?
That's right.
Is that that's what's driving the reactor cavity and the separated dryer pit drain down?
It is.
Okay, and the fuel pool's going to stay full.
That's right.
Is there going to be any kind of activity similar to what's going on now in the separated dryer pit in the fuel pool? Is that why you guys are going to keep water in it?
It'll have the waste packages in it. It's just provides additional shielding for those waste packages.
How much longer we think those waste packages are going to be on site?
We have to schedule the campaign. It requires crane support, requires transport of those waste boxes from the reactor building truck lock to the BC waste storage facility that's adjacent to the admin building. We just haven't scheduled that yet. So logistically, we've got to align all that.
So is that what you're referring to, though, when you say the B&C waste disposal hasn't been scheduled? Or
Yes.
I
Yep.
just want to make sure
That's right.
that that's what we're talking about?
That is what we're talking
And there's currently no schedule?
There is currently not a hard schedule date for completing that work. There's an end date. We have the date in which we intend to ship all that material, but a lot of it is dependent on getting the licenses that are required by the NRC for the CAS to transport.
So when is it that you're hoping to get them and be able to do it?
That we'll be able to get the material transported to the, I don't know.
Please.
Okay, I'm all set.
Dave, I'm getting a little confused on all of the various places. Is there now water in 4 places? The reactor cavity,
Yes, there is
Yes.
water in there.
in the spent fuel pool,
Yes,
in the Taurus,
yes,
and in the dryer separator pit.
that's correct.
And is that all?
Yes, well, I mean, there's some water in systems.
Okay, but in terms of the basic
Yes.
water we're talking about,
Yes.
that's
Yep.
only- and I think in response to what Seth asked, the pit and the reactor cavity will be drained in the not-too-distant future. Was that right?
That's right.
The pool will be maintained with water as long as it's necessary to provide shielding. Is that correct?
That's correct for the waste boxes.
And then what about the Taurus?
The water in the Taurus will be the ultimate repository and will remain until we have final disposition of whatever the water is, whether it be a permit modification or the ability to ultimately transport if that's the only option.
Okay, and going back, I raised the question of $800,000 gallons. Mr. Moylan, I have a letter dated March 6th from you to Mr. Pickering. And in the 3rd paragraph, it says, the total water volume used is the current estimated volume of 808,608 gallons. Is that figure wrong?
That volume is the dry separator pit, cavity, and spent fuel pool.
So it does not include the Taurus? Is that correct?
Yeah, the letter included only the volumes on the refuel floor. It did not include the Taurus volume.
So we should understand that there is probably 150,000 gallons now in the Taurus?
Approximately 100,000.
Thank you. That straightens that one out. When you had a slide up at the last meeting, and you invited some conversation back and forth, trying to figure out, for me at least.
Jim, before you go along.
I'm sorry,
can
I'm too
I-
far from the mic.
Sorry, it's Jack. So
Basically, there was a
we threw
slide at the last
threw
meeting.
A lot of numbers around.
Excuse me?
We threw a lot of numbers around tonight on water volumes and where they're located. I would ask if Holtec can validate those numbers and just send us a table with the water volumes and the locations. So we're all working off of the same page, and then it's not 808 or 880 or 900 or 160, that we just have a table that we agree, those are the numbers and the volumes and the locations that we're talking about. And
Yes,
then
we can do that.
add that to the
Yep.
meeting
Thank
minutes.
you. That would be helpful. One of your last slides in the last meeting showed a drawing that, among other things, had a loop from the spent fuel pool that included a filter in it. It also, I believe, included a demineralizer.
That's right.
Is there the same loop for each of the reactor cavity, the torus, and the pit?
There's not. The spent fuel pool system is the only one that has demineralization. All of the other volumes have a self-contained filtration system, but it's filtration only, not demineralization.
And what are those filters intended to remove?
Any particulate down to approximately half a micron size. They're 2-micron filters with an effective capability of half a micron, which is about the 10th the size of a human hair.
And when you mention particulate, are you thinking in terms of radioactive particulates or metal, for example, that's created in the process of taking everything apart, or both?
Both.
Do you have any idea what the breakdown is?
What the breakdown of?
Between radioactive particulates that are removed by those filters versus metallic particles?
We haven't characterized them for any type of metallic material removal.
Have you, excuse me, I interrupted you.
So we do know, just based on dose rates, the radioactivity removal capability of those filters, but we don't sample the filters to find out what type of metal or what else might be picked up in those filters.
So do you know what radioactive material those filters are removing?
We do.
And what is it?
It's all different. It's the chemical, the radioactive isotopes that exist within the water volumes. So there's magnesium, there's iron, there's cesium.
So there are more removed there. 'Cause I'm going to move up now because there is that filter in the vent pipe.
Right.
My understanding from your reports to the NRC is those remove cesium and one other, and I've honestly forgotten what it is.
They'll remove any particulate radiation.
And what radioactive particulate are you finding in that filter? The one in the vent pipe.
In the vent pipe, I know that we've seen cesium in those filter cartridges, but it's not cesium from the water. This is cesium from work activities that are occurring on the refuel floor. The temperature of the water is insufficient to liberate any cesium that's within the water.
My understanding, going back more years than I care to count, is if you had that evaporative pool, you would have to have a sufficient flow rate off the surface to remove particulates. Is that correct? You would not remove particulates from deep in the pool through evaporation.
Not through evaporation, no. But you would through filtration. You'd remove it
No,
from
I'm just speaking about
wherever you
evaporation at
filter
the
it.
moment. And is there enough, is the flow rate for the evaporation at the top of the pool sufficient to carry particulates?
No.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Thanks. I'm trying to picture in my mind where the water's going here. So it seems like at some point you'll have, roughly 600,000 gallons in the torus.
Right.
From the reactor and the dryer separator and then you'll have the spent fuel pool, which is like 300.
That's correct.
And then eventually the spent fuel pool water will go into the Taurus as well?
After the waste is transported, yes.
Okay. Is there anything that prevents you or any plans to kind of move the water back and forth? So let's say you get down to 200,000 gallons in the spent fuel pool. Do you need to add more water to that to maintain a certain level? Or
We do. I mean, even without heating, natural evaporation will lower the level in either the cavity or the spent fuel pool, and we'll have to provide makeup from the Taurus.
From the Taurus?
Yes.
So the total volume will continue theoretically to decline
Yes.
as you keep topping off the spent fuel pool because that's naturally evaporating, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And just one other question, I'm just repeating because I know I asked it last time. I know you're due to file your annual financial report. Well, 31st is a Sunday, so you probably get until a week from today to do it. Are you free to tell us at this point in time what was the balance in the decommissioning trust fund as of the end of 2023?
No, those figures are still in final review, and they'll be available when we submit them to the NRC.
So as of the moment, Holtec does not know what the balance was at the end of 2023. Is that accurate?
We have not established the formal regulatory position of how much money is in the trust fund at the end of 2023. That's correct.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for Mr. Noyes?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to the slide that spoke to the 84,000, the misspending of the 84,000 and the $200,000 settlement with the Commonwealth. Looking at the settlement agreement, which, as you, Chair, pointed out, is public, it says, Commonwealth further alleges the defendant's actions at the site resulted in the removal and handling of asbestos-containing material, ACM, and asbestos-containing waste material, ACWM, without using proper handling practices and without properly securing ACWM from safe storage, transport, and disposal, the commingling of ACWM with demolition debris, the dry, uncontained storage of ACWM on the ground at the site, the disposal of several dumpsters of ACWM as general construction and demolition waste at a metal recycling facility not approved to accept ACWM, the performance of asbestos abatement work without notice or an emergency waiver, all of which risk the health and safety of the public and workers at the site and the waste facilities, which received the commingled debris and created a condition of air pollution. In not admitting liability, Dave, are you denying that those activities occurred as alleged by the Commonwealth?
Again, that's subject to specific consent judgment restrictions, and I'm not going to discuss it.
I read the judgment, and there's nothing in here that muzzles any one of the participants from speaking to it. So, basically, no comment.
That's right.
So, no confirmation that these activities took place, correct?
That's right.
So, you paid $200,000. Why?
Because ultimately, the legal fees would have far exceeded that in order for us to be able to establish a position contrary to that.
So why did you then fire the subcontractors who were engaged in that activity if allegedly they did nothing wrong on your behalf?
I didn't say that there wasn't anything wrong that was done.
So, when something like this happens, and there's a mishandling of waste under your oversight as the manager of this process, when $84,000 of public funds are misused and for a disallowed purpose, not once but 5 different locations in several different states, and $4 million settlement is made to avoid criminal prosecution. Is there any internal control process in Holtec that holds anybody involved in these errors or mishandling or misuse of materials or noncompliance accountable for those actions?
Yeah, we take these very seriously, and there is accountability measures that are established as they're appropriate.
But what happens in these particular cases?
I'm not going to discuss that here.
Okay. Will the cost of disposing of the waste that was alleged to be mishandled have exceeded properly and in compliance have exceeded the cost of $200,000?
I doubt it.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at here is there's, a bad year for Holtec on the compliance side. There seems to be, a series of things that were mistakes, unfounded prosecution threats, and alleged mishandling of waste that seem to be reflective of a corporate culture that has a problem complying with the rules. And I guess from where I sit, it's very troubling, and it makes this whole process that we're going through very difficult to take comfort in, that it's providing real information and real oversight opportunities. And I think you guys have a long way to go to reclaim any hope of community trust as we move forward.
Any other questions for Mr. Noyes from the panel? Thank you, Dave. Mr. Pickering?
Mr. Chairman, members of the panel. Let's see, first of all, I have an administrative announcement. The Executive Office of Health and Human Services and Economic Development are both continuing to look into fill-in vacancies. Gerard Martin, who is here with me tonight, my colleague, has moved into a new role. He's now my boss. He's the Regional Director in the Southeast Region of Mass DEP. John Handrahan is also here. He is the Deputy Regional Director in the Lakeville office for the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup. And he will be coming to the meetings and give me a hand in the future with the 21E waste site cleanup aspects of the decommissioning. And for now, I'm still here as the EEA handicap person. So first thing, the water evaporation update. So as reported at the last handicap, Mass DEP sent a letter to Holtec on February 21st, 2024, requesting that Holtec calculate and submit an analysis of the potential to emit, as defined in the Massachusetts Air Quality Regulations, for non-radiological air pollution emissions resulting from the evaporation of the reactor process water occurring at the facility, to determine potential applicability to Mass DEP's air quality permitting regulations. The calculations were required to include potential emissions of the pollutants detected during the Pilgrim Station reactor water system sampling conducted back in April 5 of 2023, and any additional pollutants that may have been released to the reactor system since that time. That's what was asked for in the letter. So Holtec provided a response to Mass DEP on March 6, 2024, which Mass DEP has determined to be inadequate at this point. To support a further response, Holtec has agreed to conduct further water sampling to identify additional pollutants that may be released to the reactor system water due to more recent decommissioning activities. Mass DEP and DPH are in discussions with Holtec to agree to a date for sample collection so that state representatives can be present. And Holtec has agreed to collect samples of certain hard-to-detect radionuclides. So, as previously explained, a Massachusetts DEP air quality permit is required from any entity prior to constructing, substantially reconstructing, altering, or subsequently operating any emission or emission unit, any facility or emission unit where such activity would result in an increase in potential emissions of a single air contaminant equal to or greater than 1 ton. So Mass DEP is preparing a follow-up letter to Holtec's March 6th response that will require more detailed information, and it is currently under final review with the department and will be issued very soon. And just one note, Mass DEP is also aware of the letter sent from the Duxbury Select Board, most recently to the governor and other state officials, raising concerns about the evaporation. So the permit modification for the surface water discharge permit, Mass DEP is in the process of reviewing documents in preparation for issuing a final determination on Holtec's application for a permit modification to discharge decommissioning wastewater into Cape Cod Bay. The next step is for Mass DEP to issue a final determination. There is no prescribed time period for the issuance. Mass DEP's final determination would be subject to an administrative appeal under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, the Massachusetts Administrative Procedure Act. So that's essentially the same report out I had as last meeting.
And Seth, am I correct that a further appeal to the courts is also permitted?
I'm sorry, say again?
Am I correct that Holtec, if anyone is any party who is dissatisfied with the administrative appeal can take it to the Superior Court?
Right. Any action of the department that's subject to 30A is subject to appeal by whomever has standing and feels aggrieved. So, site assessment work plan, Massachusetts contingency plan. This is an update. So, as reported at the last NDCAP meeting, the Attorney General's office, on behalf of Mass DEP and DPH, provided comments on January 19th, 2024, on Holtec site assessment work plan. The comments outline important substantive changes that Holtec must make to ensure that the revised work plan complies with the terms of the Massachusetts Settlement Agreement. Holtec has provided a response to the AGO's letter, which is currently under state review.
Will you provide a copy of that letter to the panel, please?
Sure. Yep. So, response actions under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan are ongoing. The Phase 2 Comprehensive Site Assessment, which documents the nature and extent of contamination and contains a risk characterization, is due to be submitted by April 21st of 2025. So, did we previously have that? Yeah. So, we reported that, Jim, last meeting as 2024, so. Yep. So, I'm sorry? Okay, all right. So just so everybody hears it. And let's see. So as previously reported as part of cleanup actions, Holtec is conducting groundwater sampling, and the results will be included in status reports that are submitted to Mass DEP. Other cleanup issues, the DEP's asbestos section continues to be actively engaged in overseeing the demolition activity occurring at the site and meets regularly with the company every 2 weeks to manage the asbestos discovery and identification and the abatement and removal processes. It was reported publicly, as we were just discussing, that the Attorney General's office recently entered into a consent judgment with Holtec that was effective February 26, 2024, to resolve a Superior Court action related to prior asbestos violations. Holtec is obligated under the consent judgment to pay a $200,000 penalty, which may not be taken from the Decommissioning Trust Fund, as has been discussed. Mass DEP is continuing to evaluate Holtec's request to change its wastewater disposal system to a Title V system, and that's for the sanitary discharges only.
I asked you the question today whether they could discharge any of the processed water we've been talking about, and I believe your answer was no.
The answer was negative. That's correct. They cannot. Yep. Let's see, on public safety with MEMA. MEMA continues to work with their local partners on public safety planning, and MEMA also continues to work with the former emergency planning zone towns and surrounding communities on their comprehensive emergency management plans. MEMA and the town of Plymouth will be hosting incident command training on April 8th through the 10th. Is that still the same? This is a general emergency operations incident, command systems, and it applies to all emergency responses not just radiological responses. So that's all I have in prepared notes.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Mr. Pickering, if I might.
Mr. Gottlieb?
Seth, is it the department's view that the allegations of improper handling and disposal of asbestos-laden waste are accurate, and do you stand by them?
So, my asbestos section in the region developed the case. Andrew, how the enforcement process works in certain cases, and so that case was taken by the Attorney General's office, and I will let the Attorney General's press release, and it was them that reached the settlement, so I'm not going to speak for them.
On the basis of having practiced for something approaching 60-plus years, I will tell you that any lawyer who filed a complaint like the Attorney General filed that had any statements that they thought were incorrect would be in serious trouble.
Thank you both.
So did that answer your question sufficiently, Andrew?
I got it, Seth. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now we go to the item that's a little different tonight. It's public comment, and I started out by labeling public request. And on that, I think it's worth giving a little background. There has been a request made to this panel a number of times over the past 6 months that we advise the governor to investigate the whistleblower, so-called whistleblower letter of some months ago. My understanding is that request has also been made directly to the governor and many agencies that are directly responsible for running that type of investigation. We, of course, are not an investigatory body ourselves. At the last meeting, I was handed a copy of the request that had been filed in September with this panel. I circulated to all members of the panel. My question for this panel is, what action does it desire to take with respect to the request?
I say we take no action. It is not part of the Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel's charter.
I would read the charter more broadly than that, but we have a very broad charter, and we have limited time in which we can basically discuss things. I think we necessarily have some discretion as to on what subjects we would decide to entertain whatever work we would have to do to advise. And Ms. Turco, this was your request, so if you could give us a very, very brief why you believe this is something as to which we should advise the governor, and then let the panel decide what it wishes to do.
How long does she got?
I said
Time?
I don't give them that.
All right, thank you. I'll be brief. Yes, it's my understanding that the NDCAP advises the governor, but it also is supposed to encourage community involvement in matters related to decommissioning, and also to provide a forum for receiving public comments on these plans. One of the plans is the water's being evaporated, and we have a strong position that that not happen. But it all started with that whistleblower letter. And in that letter, that person, whoever wrote it, was looking out for the worker safety and the public safety regarding what's in that contaminated water that's going into our airways. And as we understand, exposure to tritium is 300 times the dose. It is through air than it is surface water discharge. And that was after a 3 Mile Island study. So one of the basic things we'd like to do is have this...
Do we know who this whistleblower is?
Yeah.
Has the whistleblower come forward?
No.
How is anyone supposed to be able to investigate this if the whistleblower does not come forward?
Right, and that's a good question. And so
I
in
think
the
it's quite,
whistleblower
frankly,
letter...
I think
yeah.
it's quite a critical
Okay.
question for all parties concerned.
Right. The whistleblower letter mentioned something in their letter, and they mentioned the plant radiation protection personnel shared information and concerns with the plant engineering staff, that the radiation monitors weren't working, that the plant personnel were exposed to high temperatures as well as radioactive airborne water, and that more public exposure to tritium via the vapor would happen. We requested a copy of that engineering change review document, thinking, we get that and we'll know what's going on. That's what was said in the letter. But we asked both the NRC and Holtec for that document, and we were denied. So what I would think is that might be a start, is just, could this panel ask for that document, and then we will see if the information in the whistleblower letter is legitimate, because it should be in that document. That's what the whistleblower identified. So it isn't really a big deal to ask for a document that would confirm or deny what the whistleblower was saying.
Okay. Mr. Moylan, will you provide the document to the panel?
Yeah, so the reason why we said that we were not going to provide that letter is that, or those comments, is that the NRC inspected that. They looked at that, and they determined that there wasn't a cause for concern. They decided not to raise a concern. I have seen personally the comments that were provided by the Radiation Protection Organization, and none of them were critical of the modification in any way. The reason why I decided that I'm not going to produce that document is because that internal work product, those people that are reviewing those ECs, they need to know that they can provide frank feedback to those engineering changes without that information becoming public or being used in a way that it was not intended to be used.
You could block their names so nobody would know who said what. But we really need to see that we need to see that document. We have no trust in Holtec. We need the facts,
Diane,
and that's what we're asking. Yeah.
You've asked.
Okay. Yes.
Was that document provided? Was that document provided to the NRC?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Briefly.
Okay. So
30
I'll
seconds.
just wrap this up.
30 seconds.
So what the public has been saying is, if the DEP is already tentatively denying the permit because of the contents of that water is evaporating with radionuclides and other materials in it and going out over the bay and going into the bay. It's the same thing. And so what we are saying, if the state can say tentative denial of surface water discharge, well then you need to stop evaporating because the junk is getting into our airways.
Time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I raise my question again to the panel. What action, if any, does the panel wish to take with respect to the request that we advise the governor that she should investigate?
Mr. Chair?
So is that a motion? I'll make a motion that we table this and move forward in the agenda.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Can there be discussion, Mr. Chair?
Of course.
Might I be recognized then, please?
You are recognized.
Thank you, sir. So, on the one hand, I don't think this body is particularly well suited, both in terms of our makeup, the support we get to conduct an investigation. However, I also don't believe an investigation by us will be particularly fruitful because Holtec makes its decisions about what it will and will not comment on based upon its own interpretation of what obligations run to them and their obligation to provide documentation that the public's entitled to the public when it's entitled to it. And we've seen that on good display today. So, out of frustration as much as anything else, I would wholeheartedly recommend to the governor that an investigation of the allegations is appropriate because we've seen and discussed numerous times just this evening alleged violations that have resulted in significant payments of funding to the government, to different government agencies. And I have no reason to suspect and no accumulated trust upon which to rely that makes me think that there's not something to this allegation and that somebody other than this group with real standing, and I think the governor is an appropriate person to lead such a charge, needs to dig into this and see what's actually happening there. Because I think if you dig into this and see what's happening on that component of the allegations, other things are going to come to light as well. So I would, if there's a motion to table, I would oppose said motion.
Do I hear any other comments from the panel?
So what are we doing? Are we tabling it, or?
The motion is to table the request.
That's correct. Mr. Gottlieb, did you make a motion not to?
No.
No, there's a motion on the table that has to be disposed of.
The next step would be to vote on the motion to table.
That's fine.
So, Mr. Noyes?
Yes.
Mr. Moylan?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Bois?
Yes.
Excuse, I did not, yes?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Fortini?
Yes.
Ms. Gatzlick?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Pickering?
Yes.
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Mr. Gottlieb?
No.
Mr. Waldron?
Yes.
And I will abstain. The motion to table passes.
Chair, you missed me.
I'm sorry, John.
I vote yes.
I put a yes by your name. I just didn't hear your name. I apologize. I should have put that one next to Brian's. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Now we move on to normal public comment, for which we have just about a little less than 20 minutes left. How many are planning to speak? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Got about 3 minutes apiece, people. We have until 8.
Hi, I'm Rosemary Shields with the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area. I've been attending handicap meetings since 2018 when we were at the high school and Sean Mullen was the chairman. That just goes to show you that I've been to a lot of the meetings. And Mr. O'Brien, Pat O'Brien, was the Holtec representative. Over the last 2 years, bi-monthly meeting to bi-monthly meeting, we heard Holtec's assurances on how asbestos removal was being properly handled. And now it turns out that that is not the case. I have quote after quote from minutes from November 27th to 2023. I don't have January's approved minutes yet, but all of them I have all of these quotes from November 27th, 2023 to September 27th, 2021. I'm going to be repeating some of Mr. Gottlieb's statement, but I think it's worth talking about. According to the consent judgment between the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office and Holtec, Holtec conducted demolition activities, including demolishing a firewater storage tank mentioned in the September 25th, 23rd minutes, and concrete masonry unit block partition walls within a warehouse that was mentioned January 23rd, 2023, all of which activities exposed asbestos to ambient air at the site. Holtec performed this demolition work without first conducting a proper asbestos survey by a licensed asbestos inspector, and we heard about that a lot, that there was a licensed inspector. Yet there was not, and without taking the precautions required by the clean air regulations to prevent the release of asbestos fibers into the air. Further, Holtec removed asbestos without using proper handling practices and without securing safe storage, transport, and disposal of asbestos, commingling asbestos with other demolition debris and storing the dry asbestos uncontained on the ground. Where am I?
You've
Uncontained
got
on the
about
ground.
30 seconds.
I got 3 seconds.
30.
30 seconds. As Mr. Gottlieb said, what is the point of us being here when we be continually being told that, oh yes, everything is okay, and then we find out it's not. Something is rotten in Denmark, and later on I would like to talk to the MEMA, Mr. O'Brien, to find out really what's going on as far as safety in the surrounding towns. Thank you very much. Sorry,
Thank you.
but I couldn't say more.
Hi,
Dr.
Dr. Barry Potvin, Chair of the Plymouth Board of Health. I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can. I thought I was going to have more time as a member of the panel, but obviously I don't. So Seth brought up the mention of the Duxbury letter. I just wanted to add to that the same letter, or a very similar letter, has already been sent to the DEP and to the governor by Situate and most recently Pembroke, and several other towns are considering doing the same thing. And then I have to clarify a few things.
Mr. Poffan, the one I was referring to is a different letter.
Okay.
It was written March 18th. But there were similar letters from Duxbury and the other communities for other reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I need some clarification because we had these discussions at the Board of Health fairly frequently. With respect to the cost for shipping the water out of state to a disposal facility, I recall that some time ago, I think you mentioned that the cost was something like $20 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe Dr. Singh was on the record as providing the cost of $20 million for transport.
Okay, I assume that referred to what the water volume was some time ago.
I think it was a figure of approximately 1 million gallons.
Okay, because I believe you said at one point that when the Holtec first purchased the plant, there was about 2 million gallons of water. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. So as the volume of water decreases, does that also decrease the cost for shipping it out of state to the disposal facility?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Two other things that I should mention fairly quickly. There's been some discussion about, obviously, the use of the Decommissioning Trust Fund, and it's not clear to a lot of us whether or not that money can be used to pay taxes, to pay payment in lieu of tax agreements, or for lobbying expenses. Are those all covered under the Decommissioning Trust Fund?
I believe they are allowed expenses under the Decommissioning Trust Fund regulations.
Okay. Absent that, if they weren't allowed, would the decommissioning process be slowed?
I don't understand the question.
If those were not allowed expenses to be paid for out of the Decommissioning Trust Fund, and assuming that other funds were not used for the same purpose, what would happen in terms of the length of the decommissioning process?
You've got about 30 seconds, Barry.
Okay.
I can't speculate
Okay.
on how that would change schedules.
In my 30 seconds I have left,
You're down to about 15.
I would like to ask also about the real-time monitoring of the releases and also for the dry casks. I did send information to Holtec about monitors available from Merian and Overhoff companies that can measure tritium and other nuclides, and they can be mounted in place or moved. I believe I sent it to you, and I think somebody else at Holtec. Were those devices evaluated? Was there any possibility that they could be put in place and utilized for monitoring?
Our evaluation so far is that live-time monitoring for tritium is still probably a decade away in a way that's reasonable and reliable.
Thank you, Dr. Potkin.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, remind me.
Honorable committee members and members of the community. My name is Art Disloges. Good evening. And I represent the Massachusetts chapter of the Sierra Club, the largest grassroots organization dedicated to protecting our environment. I am also an elected town meeting member at Plymouth. Tonight, my remarks center on the forced or accelerated evaporation of water containing nuclear materials and other contaminants into the public air by Holtec International. Over the past months, at this panel meeting, Holtec and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission made presentations that the quality of nuclear and other contaminants emitted in the air were far less than background levels we are exposed to in our daily lives. The conclusion of these presentations was that we are relatively safe. We also heard the purpose of this first forced evaporation was to provide warmth to site workers and maintain the integrity of the fire suppression system. The community is not reassured by this information provided by the NRC that these radioactive emissions are safe. Expert testimony given at the Plymouth Board of Health has maintained that these emissions are dangerous to our health. So the community asks, why can't we find a better way to provide warmth to workers than expose thousands of people to this health risk? Perhaps installing heating or even warmer clothing would work. I believe that the stated benefit, a warmer work environment, does not measure up to the anguish that this causes to many people. Because of the health risk to our community and the dubious nature of the stated benefit, I call on Holtec to pause the accelerated evaporation of this radioactive wastewater until it is determined safe. Further, I am running for state representative to represent Plymouth in the State House in this year's election. If elected...
30 seconds, Art.
This is the last sentence, Mr. Lambert.
I thank you.
If elected, one of my first measures will be to introduce legislation that imposes a moratorium on this accelerated evaporation until a health study concludes it is safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. Sorry. Chris Nord from Amesbury, Massachusetts. I'm here because we have a plant near me, and whatever Holtec is allowed to do down here, we're likely to see happen on the North Shore sometime in the next number of years. Just to follow up on something that was just stated by the previous speaker, we've now known for 18 years that the preeminent physicians in our country have said that there is no safe threshold below which radiation is not harmful. That's the National Academies of Science, Biological Effects of Ionizing Radiation number 7, published in 2006. The problem we have is that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission can't operate these facilities if they're not allowed to release radiation to the environment, and that's what we're stuck with. I want to know, I have a series of questions today and not enough time to get the answers. I'm going to run out of my 3 minutes, so I'd like to ask the questions. Number one, apparently there's low-level waste buried on the Pilgrim site. Does the state of Massachusetts know where the waste is, or does Holtec? And if so, or even if they don't, is Holtec going to be responsible for removing the low-level waste that's buried on site? That's the first one. Second one, scientific estimates indicate and have indicated by scientists provided by Entergy, the owners of Pilgrim before it closed, that as much as 60% of the radioactive vapor produced by emissions from the plant would end up in the water. Is that not a direct violation of the Ocean Sanctuaries Act? And why isn't the state of Massachusetts taking action to stop this from taking place, since that seems to be what Holtec wants to do? That's the second question. Third question is, according to Marco Caltofen, PhD of Boston Chemical Data Corp., Holtec's forced evaporation of all radioactive water will create a concentration of radionuclides on site 1 million times that found in Massachusetts coastal waters. What safeguards are in place from the state of Massachusetts or NRC to protect our regional environment from these toxins, and what is Holtec's and or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's plan for the proper final handling of this incredibly dangerous residual waste, which I will say parenthetically is probably called low-level waste, even though it's highly radioactive.
Could I just ask, how many questions do you have?
One more.
Fine.
And that is, I just saw a document today that I can't actually cite. I can find it if I need to, that in August of last year and in February of this year, radiation monitors that I believe were owned by Holtec failed their calibrations. So my question is twofold. Were those monitors monitoring the boiling off water that is being forcibly evaporated? And if so, how do we actually know what kind of radiation is going out into the environment if those monitors can't be counted on to be monitoring correctly? I happen to be part of a radiation monitoring network in northern Massachusetts. We have to calibrate every year, and they have to pass.
Thank you.
That was it. Thanks a lot.
Hi, Diane Turco with Cape Town Windows. Just quick, how many of you think that NDCAP should have gone forward with a recommendation to the governor to initiate an investigation? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Okay. Just checking. Just quickly, Mr. Moylan, you just recently sent a letter to the DEP, and you clearly state that there is 808,608 gallons of water in the spent fuel pool, reactor cavity, and dry separator pit. It's right in this letter you recently sent. You also included that the analysis conservatively assumes that the total volume of the waters would evaporate in 1 year. And we're hearing that Holtec has to pause because of the water issues, but in this letter you're stating it would be evaporated in 1 year. And I want to read a letter. I just received it on the way here, and it's very tiny, so let me see if I can read it.
Can I answer that first question? I mean, that you have to make assumptions with respect to evaporation to determine what the radionuclide concentration is and what the release is. We established a 1 year period because it's completely unrealistic and it's a beyond worst case scenario.
I'm just reading from the letter that was sent recently by Holtec, and I'll share it with anyone. And Seth has it. But this is to Mr. Moylan, and it was sent today. Dear Mr. Moylan, we have been closely following the decommissioning of the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station in Plymouth as the elected representatives of the residents of South Shore and Cape and Islands. We have significant concerns with the environmental impact of evaporating radioactive wastewater absent of treatment, filters, real-time monitoring, or independent oversight. In a letter to Holtec dated September 25, 2023, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, quote, instructed Holtec to contact the department before implementing any plan to dispose of water through evaporation, unquote. To date, you have neglected to address this directive by proposing a plan acceptable to the Mass DEP. The NRC has already documented physical changes to the site, and Holtec has admitted to installing and using immersion heaters, which has led to significant unregulated evaporation. Evaporating wastewater without oversight endangers our communities and the environment. At this time, we request that you cease all evaporation until the Mass DEP can fully analyze this untested method of wastewater disposal. Signed, Senator Sue Moran, Senator Julian Cyr, Representative Kip Diggs, Representative Kathleen Lenatra, Representative Dylan Fernandez, Representative Krista Flanagan, Representative Matthew Maratori, Representative Sarah Peak, Representative David Vieira, and Representative Stephen Zaros. Our elected officials are now telling you to stop the evaporation. Will you do so?
We've responded to Mass DEP's request. If they have a follow-up request, we'll respond to that as well. So we're being open and transparent We're being responsive to the community. And we will work with our regulators to make sure that they understand exactly what we're emitting and that everything we're emitting is within regulation.
Our representatives, our elected officials ask that you stop evaporation.
Thank you, Diane. Would you send us that letter, please?
Yes, well, Seth has.
I don't have that yet, Diane.
Okay.
Did that come today?
Yep.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
Dr. Cronin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. My name is Ben Cronin. I'm a member of the Duxbury Nuclear Advisory Committee, but I am speaking in my own capacity tonight as an individual citizen. Through the chair, I would like to ask Mr. Noyes, and I suppose Mr. Moylan could answer this as well, a question. And thank you for your presentation, Mr. Noyes. I know it's actually a significant amount of work, so I do appreciate that. I noted that you acknowledged, of course, and I appreciate your acknowledgement of Holtec's recent issues with state and federal authorities. I noted as well on Holtec's website that it states that it is, quote, committed to being an ideal corporate citizen, end quote. The Oxford English Dictionary defines ideal as, quote, conceived or regarded as perfect or supremely excellent in its kind, answering to one's highest conception, end quote. Given that definition, and given the recent actions we've talked about tonight, do you believe that Holtec is, quote, an ideal corporate citizen, end quote? Thank you. Do you have a comment?
I believe that we are. It doesn't mean that we are infallible.
Okay.
When mistakes are made, we correct those mistakes and we move forward.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Jamil Graham, DJAMILGRAHAM. I'm a citizen of Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm here because Boston is very, very close to Plymouth as well. And I'm really grateful that the person from Seabrook is here because I really feel that two things. One is that I'm dumbfounded that we have sides. We have this appearance of the people who want to continue the behaviors that clearly are in question, that have created hazards, that have created health issues for time immemorial. And we have people who don't want to have that. But why do we have sides? Because we have one planet. And I really wanted to bring this here. This here Earth, this here's my best friend. This Earth is my best friend. And everybody on this planet depends on her. If you're wearing clothes, if you're sitting in a chair, if you ate today, we can thank her. And it's really cool, the intelligence of this planet. You see this water and the air around her, it's all one. Just like we are all one. Every one of us has the same red blood and the same white bones. So I really am grateful to be a part of all the intelligence that comes here and the commitment, whatever, quote, side you think you're on, because we have one Earth. And I want to especially acknowledge and thank Mr. Potvin. I really appreciated a lot the public forum that you did. So in my last few minutes or seconds, I would really like to work with anybody who would help me put together a public forum in Boston, Massachusetts, because we think we're so far away, but we're not. And I really believe that the more we educate people and open our heart to understand that everybody is on the same side, I really do believe that we could come up with a solution that would help promote the growth and true thriving for all the generations coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Michael Hugo, and I am the Director of Strategy and Government Relations for the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards. And I want to just say that we represent all 351 boards of health across the state, I spend an inordinate amount of my time in Plymouth County working with your shared services grant groups here. And I've become very close friends with Dr. Potvin through my work here, and very acquainted, MAHB is very acquainted with the situation and the issues here today. So, Mr. Noyes, we're concerned that any unnecessary release of radioactive water to the environment endangers the public health and safety of Plymouth area residents, in fact, all of Massachusetts' residents and beyond, thanks to the previous speaker, even though the damage may not be evident for 10 or more years. Even a 1% increase in cancer cases would result in about 25 additional cancer cases per year in Plymouth County. Plymouth County is already has a higher cancer rate than any other parts of Massachusetts except for Nantucket. There's about 470.1 cases per 100,000, according to Dana-Farber. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission standards for tritium release were set 50 years ago by studying 20 to 30-year-old males from the Manhattan Project. In our attempt to help the Board of Health here, we are hamstrung by the fact that we do not have our arms around the universe of studies that are available. So, Mr. Noyes, my question is, could you either right now, and I don't think you can off the top of your head, but could you supply me with a list of all of the studies, cancer studies, that you're aware of that may have any effect on the questions here today about this plant, and also any that you may have done and participated in? Will you share that with me? The ones that you know of.
I don't know of any specific cancer studies other than the ones that are bases for the federal limits that are established for the plant.
Have you done any cancer studies independently at Holtec?
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you. I have no other.
Thank you.
We have,
I have two. I'm going to get Caleb one.
no, I was going to say we have one gentleman waiting.
I know we have, but basically, I also noticed that we have Caleb White from Senator Warren's office that I have been ignoring for the past hour and a half plus. And Caleb, if you have anything to say, I apologize. Please, it's your time.
Sorry about that. No, nothing to add. I appreciate you making time for us tonight, but happy to be here, and thank everyone for their comments tonight.
Thank you, and I apologize again. Okay. And we have Mr.
Brian Campbell.
Brian Campbell.
Yeah, hello, Brian Campbell. At first, I'm just wondering, Brayton Coal Plant, when it was decommissioned, I'm sure it had a lot of asbestos in there. And one of the workers were killed dismantling it. And a $620 million cooling towers were blown up. That, to me, is just killing our civilization. And I strongly support discharging treated water from Pilgrim Nuclear Station into Cape Cod Bay. Holtec is also decommissioning Indian Point Nuclear in New York. Generation Atomic calculates the water outside the plant, if one were to hypothetically consume it, they would need to drink 80 gallons to equal the radiation dose received from eating a regular banana. This will be about the same for Pilgrim. Closing Pilgrim raised Massachusetts emissions just as in New York, as Guardian reports on the 20th article about Indian Point premature closing. A nuclear plant's closure was hailed as a green win. Then emissions went up. Shuttering of New York facility raises awkward climate crisis questions as gas, not renewables, fills the gap in power generation. This shows Massachusetts' emissions reduction focus on renewables is destined to fail. And one can easily see coal-burning Germany RE failure at electricitymaps.com. Today, Germany was 561 versus France nuclear, 32 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour of electrical generation. The presentation by Holtec to this panel shows Holtec to be a good corporate citizen performing the Pilgrim decommissioning in a truthful and open manner that should be commended. Instead, Senator Markey expects Holtec to fund Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute study of treated water discharges, which was not in any agreements for Pilgrim's decommissioning. Unfair.
30 seconds, Mr. Campbell.
And Holtec is right to refuse Markey's demands. Markey is funding the study with $130,000, which is $75,000 is provided by NOAA Sea Grant. As $263 million in revenues in 2020.
Brian, could you wrap it up? You're at 3.
Woods Hole shifts its conclusions on studies depending on funding sources. In response to an email inquiry by Save the Right Whales Coalition, Woods Hole said they received a $500,000 donation directly from Ørsted. Woods Hole has supported offshore wind since 2019. New England Aquarium received a donation pledge of $250,000.
You are over time. I'm going to have
from
to
Bay
cut you
State
off
Wind.
very quickly.
In 2019, Vineyard Wind donated an undisclosed amount to the aquarium. They have a really nice display of
Brian,
offshore
I'm going to
wind
have
at
to
the
cut
New
you
England
off. You are well
Aquarium
over
now.
time.
The Environmental League of Massachusetts.
No,
No.
that's rude. That's rude.
No, please.
You're rude doing that.
All right. That brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is review, discussion, and then we will see what about on the annual report. Just a little history for those who aren't here. We file an annual report as required by the statute every day. I wrote and circulated a draft annual report in January. I asked in that for people to review it and to provide me comments, and particularly to point out whether anything in what I had sent was inaccurate. I received extensive comments from Ms. Gatzlick, from Mr. Fortini, comments from Mr. Noyes, who pointed out a number of inaccuracies that I hope have been taken care of, and if I haven't, I hope you'll tell me again. A comment from Mr. Slocum and a comment from Jack Priest. Sent out a second draft roughly a month after that, and then after a couple emails that came to me, I sent out a third draft on March 21st. That, I think, is probably the one from which we should be working. We need to decide what we are going to do with it. My suggested procedure, but it's going to be up to the panel, would be that we get it on the floor for discussion. And then basically, if people have things they want to change, that they present a motion to do so. That may, I recognize, shortchange a little of what often is a wider-ranging discussion at the outset, which I would not cut off, but I would suggest that if we go through on changes people want to make, the generalized comments that people want to make will be certainly raised as we discuss the changes, and it may, in overall, be more efficient. So with that, I would move and ask for a second that we approve the March 21st draft as circulated. We need a second to get it on the floor.
Make that second, Mary Waldron.
It's moved and seconded. It is on the floor, and floor is open for the panel members.
Mr. Chair, I had some, I have a comment.
Mr. Bois?
Yeah, I'm sorry that I've been having computer problems and wasn't able to send you earlier comments, but I did send you around 5 o'clock tonight with deep apologies, a review of the March 21st. And although most of the comments are just hopefully helpful edits, there was a significant issue that I had with the discussion that you presented about the water discharge, and I did send you some lengthy discussion about that, and I would hope that you would take that into consideration before approving that draft.
I would apologize, Pine, that I have not had the opportunity yet to read what you sent me. I'd left home by then.
I'm not surprised, and I do apologize for that, but it was my first opportunity to take a look at it. Sorry, but I do have an objection to that particular segment of it. Other than that, as I said, I think the rest of it is fairly minor.
Point out
and
where
that
you are in the report so that we can follow it.
Yeah, I sent it to everyone.
Okay, but I'm looking at the report now. To what page should I turn?
Oh God, who knows? It's toward the end. It's so you're I think you're 24 pages, eh? So it was let me I don't have it open right now because I have too much open right now.
Yep. Let me see if I can
But
find what you said.
it's the section. It's the section toward the end about the where you go into the how to deal with the remaining water evaporation and off-site discharge, and you're recommending that it be transferred by truck, and I really don't agree with that. I think the way that it was phrased, it suggests that the NDCAP would do that, even though you don't say that. I think that it's projecting to the governor and to the other agencies of the Commonwealth that that's what we think, and I certainly don't think that. And I think it bears either more discussion or change in language of the report.
I agree. I'm looking at what is now, I think what you're referring to. I do not recall the report made any recommendation on that. I think basically it does say that we have not made any recommendations on that subject. I'm not sure where she is. That's my problem.
I'm on page, I guess it starts on page 13.
Oh, okay,
I have
I'll move back.
that whole section highlighted, and then it keeps going, really. So it's 13, it's mostly 13 and through 15, I think. But I haven't even caught up to myself
Right,
here.
but I don't think there is a recommendation there. That's what I'm having trouble with.
Hang on a second.
Shipping water off-site is on page 16. What it says is we don't know how much water, but it also is clear that when you get to, I believe, to 18, that we have taken no position and made no recommendations regarding final disposition of the water.
I don't know why I can't even read my. Yes, but you make a lot of statements in here. So you're talking about West Andrews, Texas. You're talking about how you're comparing the environmental justice communities of Plymouth and Texas. You're talking about Senator Markey, and then you're saying that a number of NDCAP members expect, that several 100,000 gallons or more may evaporate before it would be necessary to ship any. And then it goes into this discussion, and I don't really feel like it's very clear or useful to the governor. And I just don't feel that it's reflecting what the panel thinks. I think it's reflecting what you think, and maybe what Mary thinks, or maybe what Henrietta thinks, and that's about it. And I just feel like it's needs some work, and that we can do a little bit better on that to come to an agreement.
Without having read it, let me get back to the microphone.
I
Without
can't
having
even
had time to read
get my
yours, have you
comments open
suggested
right now.
language in what you've sent us?
Oh, here it is. Okay, so you're referring to various years of discussion.
Where are you, please?
Like I said, I'm on page. It starts on 13 where it says number 3, shipping water off-site.
Right, and that is on page
13.
That's actually on page 16.
Well, it's your page number 13 as you have it written.
It's on the look, nothing like looking at different editions.
No, well, I'm looking at the 21st.
I have the shipping water off-site section.
It's actually, let's see. Hold on a second. Yeah, no, it's 13. Yeah. Anyway, it's shipping water off-site, which is after your. I mean, that's not the only comment I have, but it'd be nice to sit down and go over it.
What I have under 3 here is that what the reference to what Vermont had done and Connecticut River done has been stricken. The only how much water, a gallon to cubic feet, so we know what we're talking about. That's about all I have here. I'm just not sure what you're referring to, and I'm sorry.
I'm referring to the whole section number 3. That's what I'm referring to. I don't agree with hardly any of what is said in there.
Pine, is that the
other than
Pine? Is that the section that you have highlighted in yellow?
Yes.
Okay. Is there what in your view is inaccurate in that section?
That you're speaking for the Endicap.
Actually, I speak,
Not a
I say what their Holtec's DAR says. I then give you a conversion of gallons to cubic feet. It's just pure math. I then have what Holtec told Senators Markey and Warren. I then say that Endicap doesn't know how much water is going to remain. I say that Holtec pointed to environmental justice. I say that a panel member pointed to some different data. I said that Holtec said there's a risk of spillage, and I also say that Holtec told us that what it is shipped, it's shipped without any spillage. What's inaccurate?
Pine, are you focused on the
That you're recommending that it be shipped. That's what's inaccurate.
I am not recommending that it be shipped. I am simply telling you I've listed all of the options. I have listed what Holtec has said about it. I have said what other panel members have said. There are no recommendations.
And Endicap has taken no position and has made no recommendation of the disposition of the water on site?
Endicap has taken no position and has made no recommendations relating to the final disposition of the water on site.
And this is a 2023 report, and so you're going back to 2022 and 2023 and confusing everybody.
In your mind, has Endicap ever made any recommendation?
How can we? We've never gotten a chance to actually talk about it.
So we haven't. So what's wrong with the statement that we haven't? I'm just confused.
That we're making it so confusing, I guess.
You know, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You know, we can, I'm still on the precipice of doing what was done last year, which is spending a year talking about what happened over a year. Handicap thinks nothing. We have a bunch of people that have their own views about what they've heard, their own feelings about how much truth they've been told. And so, if we want to have a summary report that reflects what everybody thinks, you're never going to achieve that consensus because there's no consensus among this body. So, part of me thinks what you've done is a perfectly accurate recitation of what transpired. Part of me thinks you should compile all the minutes, slap a cover sheet and say, this is what happened in handicap, Governor, happy reading, and be done with it. Because if we're going to spend a whole bunch of time trying to come up with a consensus way to report this information when there's been no attempt to achieve consensus throughout the course of the deliberations, I don't see the point. We're rewriting history. So,
well, that's exactly why we used to do the.
That is how we used to do the annual report, Andrew.
Right.
Well, there's some merit to that. Frankly, I'm not comfortable putting my name on an annual report because at this point, my minority view recommendation letter to the governor is going to say, I don't think this group functions. I don't think it provides the meaningful oversight that was intended to provide because it doesn't get honest and truthful information from the project management team involved, and therefore we are hobbled in our.
That's your opinion.
So, we're going to spend weeks doing this, to no particular value, in my opinion. I'd make a motion that we pick the annual report and have it comprised of the minutes of the meetings and say, this is what we did, Governor. Happy reading.
Ms. Gatzley, you were going to say something?
No. Mr. Noyce wants to comment.
Dave?
I just wanted to say that I cannot support the report as written, and a piece of it is that one of the comments I provided was that the storage of spent fuel was not discussed in any of the meetings, but yet it still appears prominently as if it were a topic of discussion for the past year. There are also the omission of significant items that occurred during the course of the year. An NRC presentation in September of 2023 that provided tritium facts, the fact that tritium research facilities in universities discharge tritium to the sewer system, and the NRC provided perspective on historical and current releases, that Ms. Dubois identified pretty eloquently that the delay could cause environmental challenges associated with sea level rise, and that doesn't appear anywhere in the report. There was unprecedented voluntary split sampling between Holtec and the state, and there's no mention of that in the report, even though there had been accusations for a significant period of time that we were taking water samples off of rain barrels. So there's as much that is not in this report that deserves to be, as is in this report that reflects the opinion, I believe, of just a couple of people on the panel.
I guess my only comment to that is, in the majority of this report is very much like what was circulated back in January, and to which I asked for comments, among other things, what people wanted to add. And I'm hearing a lot of brand new things right now. Panel's got to deal with it as it is. But I personally wish I had, you and I had some extensive conversation, Dave, and I wish you'd raised these earlier.
Well, the first one I did about spent fuel. We never in 2023 discussed spent fuel, but yet there's a significant amount of discussion about questions that Mary asked of the NRC regarding the transport of radioactive material that I don't know what value added it has.
Well, I think the reason for that, and I can't speak for my wife, who unfortunately is sick and not here tonight, was the reason she was asked the NRC, and I may have asked Neil Sheehan myself, was what are their records of the safety of transport of radioactive materials, which struck me as a very relevant piece of information that certainly everyone should be interested in.
You asked that in January, and it's in the 2023 report. It's an email that came out in January that you.
I'm not arguing when it was or was not asked. Dave said it was asked. Okay, what is the choice of the panel?
Dave, would you provide a write-up on the sampling, how you'd like that written up?
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide a write-up on the split sampling.
Yep.
The NRC's presentation, because I believe that deserves to be there. And Pine's challenge to the committee regarding sea level rise and the environmental impact of delaying the decommissioning because we can't make a decision on whether we're allowed to discharge the water or not.
I think that's acceptable.
Hey, Andrew, did you make a motion?
I did. I made a motion that we compile the minutes and send them to the governor, say this is a report of what happened in Handicap in 2023.
I'm sorry, I did not hear that as a motion. Could you repeat it, Andrew?
I make a motion that we compile the minutes of the 2023 meetings, put a cover letter on it to the governor saying this is what happened in Handicap this year.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, let me get out my vote sheet.
And Jim,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if I might,
Surely.
no disrespect to your effort to compile an accurate recitation of what transpired and to try to reflect consensus views. I think you undertook an impossible task and a thankless task and did a yeoman's job trying to do it. I don't see how you get this body to agree to it. Because if everybody's going to get their little needs and wants, then I'm going to want my picayune little needs and wants. And it doesn't shed any light on anything.
No disrespect noted, taken. One of my senior partners when I was younger said one of the nicest things I've ever heard to me, namely that basically I have no ego. So we have a motion, we have a second. The motion is that we basically take this report, forget about it, staple together all of the minutes, put a cover letter on it, and submit it to the governor. Is that roughly the motion?
It is, sir.
Okay. Mr. Noyes?
Yes.
Wow, we agree.
Mr. Moylan?
I agree.
Mr.
Put
O'Brien?
that in a minute.
Yes.
Mr. Bois?
I would agree if you include the slideshows.
The minutes, the record of the meeting of the minutes. That's what my motion is.
Yeah.
Mr. Fortini?
No.
Huh?
No.
No. Ms. Gatzlick?
No.
I will abstain. Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Pickering?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Slocum?
Abstain.
Mr. Bryant?
Abstain.
Mr. Gottlieb?
Yes.
Ms. Waldron?
Yes.
1, 2, yes.
No, she was yes or no.
That was yes, Mary, right?
I was a yes.
1, 2. Can't put it on my list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 8.
I agree.
You 8. We have 17 members. We need, that is 6. We are 1 short of a majority of the membership, so unless anyone wants to reconsider that motion, it fails.
I'll change mine to yes.
Fortini becomes a yes. We have 9 favorable votes. The motion, that is sufficient. That is a majority of our present 17 membership. Motion passes.
So where does that leave us? Are we going to issue the report now?
I believe that motion I would have taken that as a motion to amend the present report by replacing it with the stapled together that Mr. Gottlieb, excuse me, let me get back to my microphone. I would have taken that motion as a motion to amend the report that's been circulated to be what Mr. Gottlieb described. That motion having passed, I think that's where we are.
That was the intent of my motion, Mr. Chair. The substitution of the report in its entirety to be replaced with the minutes.
He basically, Andrew,
And the presentations, please, and the presentations.
Whatever was in the minutes was what my motion was, fine.
That eliminates the presentations.
Well, it was my understanding when we voted that
said it included the
that
presentations.
the minutes would include the presentations.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Fine. Whatever the voted record of the body is what I'm suggesting.
Okay. So I guess the next question is, who's going to do it?
I'll pull it together and I'll send it out for review.
Fine.
And we'll do it month by month or meeting by meeting. No, send it out by the end of next week for the member panel to comment and give back to Mr. Lambert and myself, so that by the next meeting, we'll have a finished product and we can vote on it and make it so.
Mary, can I ask you to give us a deadline for the comments?
All right?
And when
it
you,
goes out
when you send
on-
it out, you don't have to do it right now, just when you send it
Okay,
out.
and the email that I send out with the attached new version of the handicap report will have a deadline. And if you don't have any comments by the time the deadline passes, they are not going to be incorporated.
What possible comments can there be to amend, other than to amend minutes that have already been adopted by this body? We have an official record.
And posted.
There's always comments.
Posted.
But Andrew's point is well taken.
My intent in the motion was that the 12 monthly meeting minute compilation is the final report, and that perhaps I should have said chair and vice chair authorized to submit it. That was my intent. I don't see
And
any
actually,
reason why
Earl,
it's take
we-
another
we
month.
don't meet
nor
monthly,
burn
so
up
we're at
time in
12.
another meeting. Body's voted to submit the minutes of the meetings as the report. What else is there?
What else is there is the presentations contain a lot of information that the language of the minutes that were approved does not contain.
My
That's-
understanding of
that's
the
why I
motion,
asked for
Pine, was that
clarification.
it included those presentations.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconding, John? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.